Well, Lloyd, we're back and we're going to be starting our 15th episode together. This has been terrific. I've learned an awful lot. This is a whole new area for me. I know for an awful lot of people who are watching, just by looking at the comments, that they are also enjoying these episodes, probably because not many people have unpacked it like you have. Not many people have taken the time, the energy to go through and actually follow the sources. And that's what you're doing. You're following the sources. We've demanded people, if they're going to come back on you, if they're going to try to rebut you, that they support what they're saying, they source what they're saying. So far, that hasn't happened. So far, that hasn't happened. It may still do, and I'm encouraging Muslims to do so. So here's another subject, and this is a subject concerning homicide. You're telling me, and I was kind of surprised to hear this, that actually murdering other people, this is homicide. This is not revenge. This is not to do with warfare. This is actually murdering people. What we would call homicide today is actually obliged. It's actually a part of Sharia law. Now, this is new to me. So hold on, folks. I'm not the one saying this. Our good friend over here, Lloyd, is saying it. But why is he saying it? Not because he's making it up, not because it's an easy out. It's because it looks like the Sharia Reliance of the Traveler says this very thing. Over to you, Lloyd. Help us with this one. This should be exciting.
Okay, well, thank you, Jay. Good to be here again. And you're looking healthy and well after your recent bout with COVID. Looking
Oh,
back
I'm
to
back.
normal.
I was pretty well back within 3 days, even at that time. Not a very difficult COVID. If that's all the COVID is, we know this is the back end of COVID, and it's just bad colds. That's about it. But anyways,
Good to
homicide.
see.
Help me here. This is something I'd like to hear you talk about.
Okay, so again, for the audience, Reliance of the Traveler is the world's most popular Islamic law manual. It is the most owned. It's very possibly on your Muslim neighbor's bookshelf. It is also endorsed by numerous, as I showed, numerous Islamic organizations, authoritative organizations in the world, including Al Azhar University, which produces thousands of highly trained imams every year. They're a highly prestigious organization. Let me just go briefly into this section here in the Reliance of the Traveler, and they speak of retaliation for killing. Right? Notice it says here, retaliation is
Real
obligatory.
quickly, now what is the
Yes.
reference here so people can go to it?
This is O1.1. So
Okay,
this
so
is,
that's book O.
yeah, it's page 583 in the text itself, and it's page 601 in the PDF. Let's have a look at these references to killing and legalized murder, shall we say, within Islam. It says here, the blood of a Muslim man who testifies that there is no God but Allah and that I am the messenger of Allah is not lawful to shed. So it is not lawful to shed the blood of a Muslim unless he is someone who abandons his religion and the Muslim community. So this is an indication that killing an apostate is legal. This is implied here. We will now go look at further references about this kind of lawful killing within Islam. Right?
Mhm.
Notice it says that the killing of a believer is more heinous in Allah's sight than doing away with all of this world. Right? So that's all fine and well. Now, notice it says here, retaliation is obligatory. And
Hmm.
it states down here that there are cases of justifiable homicide, such as lawful retaliation. Notice that Islam allows what they call justifiable homicide or justifiable murder, such as lawful retaliation. Now, notice it states here under Islamic law, the following are not subject to retaliation. So in other words, if you shed the blood of these people, there is no retaliation. Now, if you shed the blood of a Muslim, there must be retaliation. Do you have a comment, Jay?
Yeah, just to make sure, go back to the first one, O1.1. You're saying they can shed the blood of a non-Muslim, but not a Muslim. What would be the criteria for shedding the blood? What would be the reason for
So,
shedding the blood? Do they say that?
okay, let's have a look here. Okay, I'm going to jump into the Hedaya, which is the main manual for the Hanafi school of fiqh. And it's also the largest manual that when scholars qualify, when imams, sheikhs, qadis qualify at seminary, at legal school, they qualify on the Hedaya. I want to show you this reference. I'll show you two that give you an idea into the mindset of the Sharia, the mindset of Islam. Notice this. The destruction of the sword is incurred by infidels, although they be not the first aggressors, as appears from various passages in the sacred writings which are received to this effect. And it states here, infidels may be attacked without provocation.
Oh, okay. So there doesn't really need to be a reason, is what it's saying here. You can just, if you don't like somebody, if you don't like their face, if you don't like if you had an argument, you can attack them, is what they're saying.
Let's not go that far. We would in future, I will unpack this, but I want to provide some kind of clarity to the question you asked. I want to give an insight into this. Jihad is a subset of commanding the right and forbidding the wrong. And Muslims their great commission is to command the right and forbid the wrong. I'm going to go to one more ruling. So this is a jihad ruling, but understand it's a subset of commanding the right. But this tells you that you may be attacked without provocation as a non-Muslim because you are sinning against Allah. So now I will go to my next reference. Notice here, it does say to us, people will perceive that they are attacked for the sake of religion and not for the sake of taking their property. You're attacked for the sake of religion, right? Now, notice it says here, if a Muslim attack infidels without calling them to the faith, he is an offender because this is forbidden. Yes, that is true. Now, I've said multiple times before that Islam, within the Sharia, it will say X is wrong, and then the very next sentence will say X is right for the following reasons. It will contradict itself constantly. Let's look at it do exactly that. If a Muslim attack infidels, that's you, calling them to the faith, without calling them to the faith, he is an offender because this is forbidden. Excellent. But if he does attack them before inviting them, and he kills them, as he says, slay them, and he takes their property, neither fine, expiation, or atonement is due. There is no punishment, because that which protects them, namely Islam, does not exist in them.
All right. All right. So let me just say real quick, what this looks like to me is do not attack them if you haven't really called them to faith. However, if you go ahead and attack them, you're already expiated because they're not a Muslim anyway. So pretty much it's giving an excuse that if you did not ask for them to convert, you went ahead and attacked them, killed them. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. They're not Muslims, so therefore
you're good. You're fine. Don't worry about it.
So that's
this is a common theme. This is a common theme in the Sharia. It says, no, this is bad. However, here are all the exceptions and loopholes that cancels and nullifies the rule. You will find that this is a constant theme. In the next episode, Jay, and when we get to that, we'll talk a little bit about the doctrine of obligatory lying in Islam. And you will learn about the main doctrine of lying in Islam, which is called hiyal. And you will see the source of this practice. So, notice here, in the same manner as the slaying of the women or infant children of infidels is forbidden. Oh, thank heavens, killing women and children is forbidden, except if you were to slay them, you are not liable to a fine. Oh, you killed women and children, we'll give you a fine. Oh man, I just checked, there's no fine for that.
Yeah, okay, so these are recourses. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't for us, and good for you. You will, regardless of what the motive is, we're going to go ahead and expiate you.
Yeah. If we go through this in more depth, I can provide the references that show just how authoritative this particular book is, but this is the jewel in the crown of the Hanafi fiqh. It's the largest school of jurisprudence in Islam, in Sunni Islam. Now, notice the following are not subject to retaliation. So in other words, if these people kill certain people...
The Reliance of the Traveler. Just so
Reliance of the Traveler.
And we moved back to the Shafi'i manual.
Yeah. Notice, so if you kill the following categories of people, there is no retaliation against you. There is no penalty against you. No one can attack you because of you murdering the following categories of people. Let's have a look at the categories of people for whom there is no penalty. Jay, if you can read the first one for me.
A Muslim for killing a non-Muslim.
This corroborates our previous statement, and this is not in relation to jihad.
Yeah, there you go. So in the second one, a Jewish or Christian subject of the Islamic State for killing an apostate from Islam, because a subject of the state is under its protection, while killing an apostate from Islam is without consequences. There you go.
Right, and this is not even the formal ruling on apostasy, but this is a formal ruling on apostasy. Let's continue. The last one, please, on honor killing.
So a father or mother or their fathers or mothers for killing their offspring or offspring's offspring. Wow. honor killing.
Correct. It is legal for a father or mother or a grandparent to kill their child or their grandchild. It is perfectly legal in Islam. There is legislation that allows this within the Sharia. So this is something that I believe people need to be very concerned about. This is another reason that we need to be deeply concerned. And don't forget, when imams go to seminary to train as qadis, as judges, when they learn to become sheikhs or qadis or and so on, these are the books that they study. These are the laws that they learn. This is what they conceal. This is why the Sharia is a secret. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. So now I'm going to go to one more law, the law on apostasy, the formal law on apostasy. So we're going to read very briefly, and we'll end here. Apostasy from Islam, the crime called ridda. It says leaving Islam is the ugliest form of unbelief and the worst, and it may come about even through sarcasm. When someone says, trim your nails, it is sunnah, and you say, I would not do it even if it were, that is apostasy, and that has made you an apostate. Right? Now, we see here in section 08.1, when a person who has reached puberty and is sane voluntarily apostatizes from Islam, he deserves to be killed. If you have reached puberty and you are sane and you voluntarily apostatize from Islam, you deserve to be killed. So in such a case, it is obligatory for the caliph or his representative. Now, understand, you can do this without recourse to the caliph. If there is no caliph, if you're in a time with no caliph, you must still follow the doctrine of commanding the right and forbidding the wrong, because it states if there's no caliph, you don't need the caliph, as it states explicitly in that doctrine, and you may act if there are going to be no consequences for you. So ask him to repent. And if he refuses, he is immediately killed. Not wait 3 days, kill him on the spot. Now, you have the option of waiting 3 days, you have the option of waiting 1 day, you have the option of waiting 30 seconds, you have the option of waiting 5 seconds, and you have the option of murdering him right there without waiting. So notice here it states there is no indemnity for killing an apostate or any expiation, since it is killing someone who deserves to die. These are the two major Islamic law manuals from Hanafi and Shafi'i jurisprudence. They say exactly the same things.
Okay.
I'll leave this here, Jay.
Well, I asked you to come up with reference, and you've done just that. I think many people, certainly in our circles here in the West, have never, would not accept the idea that Islam is in any way violent or that it calls for violence. And this has probably been one of the most common recourses, that you don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Smith, or you don't know what you're talking about, Lloyd, the Jongh. You're just you're not a Muslim, so therefore we wouldn't expect you to understand. What you have done here is to say, listen, it's not a matter of what I believe or what Dr. Smith believes. We're not really, you're right, we are not Muslims. We don't come from that standpoint. Therefore, we're not going to go to other Muslims to hear what they say either. We're going to go back to the original text. We're going to go and see what any good Muslim should not only be reading, but also should be practicing. And you have gone back to the Reliance of the Travelers. You've gone back to book 01.1, and you've looked and you've shown that the shedding of blood is obligatory. And when I asked, well, what were the reasons for it? You went then to the Hedaya Manual and showed, well, listen, there doesn't have to be a reason for it. You can pretty well do it if they are, if they have jumped on you or done anything to you. It doesn't give any reason. You can just go ahead and do it. What one criteria that you did come up with is you'd have to ask them if they would convert. And if they don't convert, then you're obliged to kill them. But even if they do, or they do convert, and I'm assuming if they do relent, you can still kill them and there's no recourse on you. But what's interesting is you then specified more specifically two areas that we are well aware of, and that is the problem with apostasy. Now, in the Quran itself, in chapter 4, verse 89, it does say very clearly that those who were Muslims who turn away from Islam, kill them. So it's very clear that's in the Quran as well. You're showing here in the Reliance of the Traveler, where in 08.1 and 08.2 of the Reliance of the Traveler that it is absolutely an injunction on Muslims to kill the apostates. So that supports exactly what the Quran says. It's very clear. They have left Islam. They are no longer worthy of living. And we have seen this with our apostates, like Hatun Tash. We've seen it. Al-Fadi had to leave Saudi Arabia because he became an apostate. He was thrown out of his family. His wife divorced him. All of these things. I mean, there's so many of these stories that we could go on and on and on. And most people in the West say, this is not true. These are things you're making up. Even when Al-Fadi gave his testimony, and Hatun refuses to give her testimony in public on that course, but when Al-Fadi gave his testimony, they still wouldn't believe him. They thought the guy was just lying. And yet you can see why Al-Fadi has had to live under this, and why Hatun has had to live under this. It's straight out of the manual. It's straight out of Reliance of the Traveler. You went and you also touched on the honor killings. This is one that non-Muslims categorically reject. They said there's no such thing as honor killing. It's happening, but these are aberrations, is what I've always heard. We had a girl in London when we were there a number of years ago. I can't remember how many, maybe 10 years ago, who was found in a suitcase cut up. And even as she was being pulled into the house, there were witnesses of her being pulled in the house, screaming, asking for help. And no one came to her help. And her body was found in a suitcase a number of weeks later. And when they came to court about it, the recourse was, well, this is something that's not only in the Quran. In the Quran, you can find it in the story of Al-Qadr and Moses, where he's being sent. And he does different things and takes him along as a young lad and shows him what he's to do and what he's not to do. And then in verse 74, Al-Qadr takes this young lad that comes from and he kills him. And of course, to the astonishment of Moses doesn't know what's going on. He says, what's going on? He says, I'll tell you. And then I think it's in verse 81. Let me just pick it up here. In verse 80, Al-Qadr, who is this wise man teaching Moses what to do and what not to do, he says, and as for the boy that you asked me about, his parents were believers, and we feared lest he should oppress them by rebellion and disbelief. So we intended that the Lord should change him for them for one better in righteousness and nearer to mercy. So I killed him because he would be rebellious. This is the honor killing. There is the chronic support for that. And that's the reason he was killed, because he could bring umbrage against his parents. He killed so that they could have another child that would be righteous. So you're looking and you're saying, well, that's also in the Reliance of the Travelers. And it's very clearly there in 08.1 and 08.2 that they are to kill those who bring.
It was also stated in the Hedaya. And
so you would say it's in all the manuals that this is found.
This is consistent. This is ijma. This is the consensus of all of the schools, the consensus of the greatest scholars of Islam to ever live. The Sharia is the final application. It is Islam in practice. It is taking the Quran, taking the Sunnah, and it's applying it in the Islamic society. It's applying it in the life of the Muslim.
Well, listen, this is so helpful. If I know people are going to balk at this, they're not going to like what they're hearing. Muslims will say this has nothing to do with us today. The problem is there are many Muslims in the West who don't know this. Most of the Muslims that you people are going to come across, they will reject it and say this is not Islamic. It's not the Islam I grew up with. And that's probably true for them. It's just like a Christian saying, don't read the Bible to me. I want to believe what Jesus is or what he did. I don't believe Jesus did any miracles. I don't believe he ever said that there's only one way to salvation. There are many Christians who say that, but you can't read the Bible and get away with that. So the same way for Muslims, they've got to go back to the Hedaya Manual. They've got to go back to Reliance of the Traveler in order to know what they're to walk, talk, eat, drink, sleep. In order to know how to live 24/7, they've got to follow these manuals. So it's one thing for Muslims to say, I don't believe it, I don't follow it, my family has never followed it, and another to say, hold on, why aren't you following it if you're a good Muslim? This is exactly what you're to do. This is exactly what you're to say. This is
look, Muslims, I routinely get told that Sahih Bukhari is da'if, Sahih Muslim is da'if, that the Imams are wrong, that the Hedaya is false. Now, every single source in Islam is wrong or weak, yet Islam is true. How does that make any sense? This guy's imam probably has these books on his bookshelf. He studied them at seminary for 5, 6, or 7 years. He learned on these. If this is false teachings, then aren't they going to be approaching all of these Islamic seminaries around the world and saying, hey, you guys are teaching false Islam? And why are we to take the YouTube commenters as authorities? I am pretty sure Al-Azhar University doesn't phone the YouTube commenter for advice. So this is from the greatest scholars to ever live. This is taught at seminary. This is what you learn as an Islamic judge.
These are from the
Muslims have to accept this.
The four mujtahids that you talk about, these you do not go beyond. They have been for the last 13 or 1200 years. They have been the authority on how to act, talk, eat, drink, and sleep. Because of that, that's why Lloyd is introducing this to you. It's this that we should expect. We should not be surprised that when we see it happening in the news, we now know where it's coming from. And this is why we have been saying over and over again, Islam is not relevant for the 21st century. True Islam, that which is dictated by the mujtahids, these four schools of law, that is true Islam, is not relevant for today, for any day, for you, for me, for anyone, as far as I'm concerned. And I think you would agree as well. Look, that's why we're bringing this to the fore, so you can engage with it. Now, do engage with this. Go ahead. You've got right down below. You can go ahead and come back and see. Let's see what you have to say. But please source what you're saying. God bless you.
Don't forget, it's illegal for them to do that. They cannot.
They're between a rock and a hard place. Those who want to engage with us, do give us some sources, even if it's illegal or not, because you're going to have to support what you're saying. Please,
it's treason. They'll be killed for it.
There you go. See, even that is a catch-22 for Muslims. God bless you. Thanks so much, Lloyd. This has been good having you.
God bless.
Bye-bye.